Welcome to the Generosity Experience, the podcast from Neon One, where we explore how our community show generosity, not just through money, but through relationships, time, and advocacy. I'm Tim Sarrantonio.
And I'm Sam Nyland. Together, we help nonprofit professionals connect more deeply with their communities, move supporters to meaningful action, and simplify how generosity gets done.
Each conversation brings forward the voices and insights that are shaping the future of generosity, from strategy to systems, and everything in between.
So pull up a chair. There's always room for one more in this conversation.
Welcome to the July episode of the Generosity Experience, the first episode of the month. This month, we're focusing on dreaming big. And so we have a really exciting interview with Kathy Kempf of Nuclavis coming up. We got some great stuff with the generosity spectrum that I'll be unpacking when it relates to incentives. Do you give swag in return for donor satisfaction? I'm going to unpack that. But we start always our month with the big number. And there is one person that can only answer that. And that is Abby Jarvis. Abby Jarvis, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here again. We're going to get into the swing of this soon.
We are, because folks, there's only 3 questions I ask Abby every month, and they are the same 3 questions, but the answers change.
Mm-hmm.
Abby.
Yes.
What's the big number this month?
The big number for July is 1,477.
Why is that a number people should care about? Because it's very specific.
It is very specific. So when we wrote the generosity report, we looked at a panel of 99,522 people and how they supported their favorite nonprofits. And of those people, 1,477 of them participated in peer-to-peer events.
So what are 3 actions people can take around that data that we just talked about?
So this was the smallest cohort in our study, but they did some really amazing things. So if you are listening and you run a peer-to-peer campaign, here are 3 things you can do with this group. The first is really to focus on giving them really exceptional experiences and to be very intentional about building relationships with this group. The reason this is such an important thing is because someone has to be really invested in your organization or your work if they are going to donate their time and their effort and their resources, but also their reputation and their or access to their networks. So we see this group of very engaged people, but almost 48% of the peer-to-peer participants in our group were only engaged with a chosen nonprofit for a single year. And that's not a fantastic rate. I think we would all agree with that. But that does mean that there are a lot of opportunities for nonprofits to do a better job of retaining and engaging this group of people. The second thing I would encourage you to do is to focus on cultivation in addition to just straightforward retention. Retention rates for this group were low, but those who did stay involved over time didn't increase their average annual donations at the same rate as the rest of the panel. For the first 3 years, the average annual giving for this group stayed static, whereas for the panel, it increased year over year. So this is another indicator that there's a lot of nonprofits to do a better job engaging this group. There's a lot of opportunities for people to build deeper relationships with this kind of supporter. And then as those relationships deepen, so too should their average annual giving increase over time. And then my third recommendation for this group really relates to the first 2. I would really encourage you to give these folks different ways to get involved beyond participating in a peer-to-peer event. Over 13% of the people in our peer-to-peer participant cohort also volunteered. They also had memberships. They had recurring donations. They were a very engaged group of people. But if you are not intentionally cultivating those relationships, intentionally drawing them deeper into engagement with your organization, as we kind of talked about earlier, there's a very good likelihood that they'll churn. So a lot of room to get creative with this group and keep them involved.
And what's kind of cool, Abby, and we're going to get into the swing of it because my generosity spectrum segment actually will help with that last one. because we talk a lot about like, well, maybe if somebody signed up, they get a bag. What's the psychology happening behind that? That's what I'm going to unpack later in the episode. But
Oh, good.
yeah, I know we can have a discussion, but we're supposed to keep this under 5 minutes. So Abby, I'm really excited. Thank you for this month's big number.
Absolutely. See you next month.
All right, so we just heard from Abby Jarvis about the big number. We heard a little bit about peer-to-peer fundraising from the Generosity Report. But in all honesty, when I knew we were going to talk about peer-to-peer, there's literally only one person that I want to have on the podcast, and that is Kathy Kempf, founder of Nuclavis. Kathy, welcome to the Generosity Experience.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, so I've known you for a few years, but let's kind of start with the basics for people who might not know about you and your past. You know, who are you? What do you do for a living?
So I have been in the space for 25 years. My whole career has been dedicated to serving the nonprofit space on the for-profit side, building or serving for different companies that create software to help organizations raise money, and specifically peer-to-peer. So everything that I've done career-wise is of this niche that's peer-to-peer, which was all offline until 2001, 2002, and then suddenly it's become this entryway for so many different organizations to attract new people to their cause and mission. So I am a philanthropist. I am a do-gooder. And really someone who's constantly looking at how I can make the world a better place, making one difference at a time, whether it's technology or adopting dogs or my own nonprofit. I want to leave a legacy of doing good, ultimately.
I love that. And that's nice transition into usual my kind of second question I ask folks to kind of help open you up a bit to the audience. So besides work, what are things that drive you? What's kind of inspiring you right now to action?
I will say there's actually like two main things that really drive me personally. My first one is I'm a huge animal lover, and I have 5 rescue dogs. I thought I'd only have 2, and now suddenly I have 5, which makes me totally crazy. But I have a soft soul. I hear their stories and I know that I can make a difference in their lives, and I want to snuggle all of them and save all of their lives. So I have to stop looking at all of the rescue groups because I keep wanting more. And my husband might divorce me if I keep adopting dogs. The second thing is I'm also incredibly passionate about helping provide a way for those in extreme poverty to end that cycle of poverty through education, not a handout, through education. And so I actually started a nonprofit called Moja 2 13 years ago. And that's my passion project in life. That's what me and my husband, my board, we work on nights and weekends as volunteers. We have about 200 students that are going to high school and university, and being able to go to Kenya every year for 2 weeks, interview these students, and be able to pick them at 14 and then see them at 24, 25, where they're starting their life. They now have a career. They can provide support for their families, for their communities. It's really inspiring. It's life-changing for me. And you can change just one life. Like, you don't have to boil the ocean. We don't necessarily have to have a Bill Gates Foundation where you're doing these like massive giant things. We can all do something small. And it's, what is your passion? It could be education. It could be helping rescuing animals. Like, all of us have something that really touches our heart. And so for me, those are the two things that really drive me day to day, and figuring out, I want to make a difference in someone's life and leave a legacy of change, of inspiration, and hopefully changing as many lives as I can.
Well, we'll definitely put the organization in the show notes for people to check out if they want to learn more about that. But you even started kind of hinting at other things, those connection points, and for folks that haven't checked out the work that Kathy's doing, this is a nice time to check it out after, of course, you listen to the podcast, because we're going to explore this a bit. When I first met Kathy, it was obviously in the context of learning about peer-to-peer fundraising and things like that. I'd love to hear why that particular way of engaging generosity, because even in the generosity report, we looked at volunteers and we looked at membership and recurring giving. We're going to really drill into peer-to-peer fundraising, not just here, but later this month. So here's a plug, folks. On July 16th, come to Dream Big. Kathy and I are going to rock a peer-to-peer event. We're not going to talk about that too much today. We're going to talk about general peer-to-peer, but you're the only person that I think of when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to especially the technology. But how did you get into that? Let's start there. Tell me a bit about your journey toward that part of our world.
So in early 2000s, there were peer-to-peer existed. It was typically called run, walk, ride. That was what the term was back in the day. And the categories were very much those three and those three alone, and it was all offline. It was writing letters, going door to door and asking for donations. And, you know, right in the early 2000s, we started moving into this great world of online giving and using credit cards online and Amazon, and what's the other store that I'm trying to remember the other bookstore. No, there's another bookstore that was really popular and then kind of went Barnes and Noble. Exactly. Where I'm like, oh my gosh, now you have, you know, your ebook reader, and everyone was getting more comfortable with the idea of doing online. There you go, Walden Books
for mine. Yeah.
And so I was actually working at the time for a software provider that built a peer-to-peer fundraising solution. So I was on the team working with the product managers and working with their pilot clients. How do we move this organizational fundraising experience that's currently 100% offline to an online world? And what does that translate to? How is that going to work? How do we communicate with fundraisers? How do you communicate with donors? It is incredibly different than direct response. You have your fundraisers who are your champions and your advocates for the organization, but the donors are indirect. They are not giving to the cause. They are giving to you as a fundraiser. So I could be fundraising for organization X, Y, or Z. The person who's donating might not necessarily care. And so it is really different than direct response, where their affiliation is to that cause. In this case, the affiliation is to the fundraiser. And so you have to talk to the fundraisers differently, because you have to inspire them to reach out to their network. You have to motivate them. You also have teams. And then you have, you know, the donors, and they're indirect. So you have to talk to them totally different than direct donors, because you have to educate them about the cause. They don't know all of the great work, the impact that you're making. And so to me, it's this really unique challenge of how do you properly communicate to these different audiences in a way that's really helping promote the mission forward. And peer-to-peer is evolving in terms of the types of events that they're doing. Before it was, you know, I'm just doing my 5K. Then it was walk, run. Now it's cycling, endurance. And now we're doing pickleball and, you know, indoor cycling and ice hockey, right? It's very, very different and very diverse. And so you constantly have to be following the trends of what people care about. What are they interested in? How are you inspiring them to be part of that? And how are you getting them to motivate to reach out to their friends and family to ask for gifts and make sure they're making the greatest impact? So to me, it's such an opportunity to bring new people to the organization. It's almost like a front doorstep. It's a porch. You're out there and you're letting people come in, learn about the organization. They may choose or not to be involved further, but it's an invitation. And it is a way to really develop that community component and start bringing those people into the fold and hopefully working through different stewardship opportunities to convert them into major donors.
So how does mobile play into this, though? Because obviously people are on the go, but you know, a lot of the different even platforms like Neon One, right? We're focusing on get them to the online donation page and make the thing there. But you've taken a completely different approach to the experience here. Can you unpack that? Because that's a really nice overview on peer-to-peer itself. And I know it's also evolving because you have things like live stream fundraising now as well, where people might do events and stuff like that. It doesn't even have to be a physical thing. But mobile's a completely different component on top of that. Can you explain that? Because you are the expert on this.
Yeah, I mean, mobile, came out in 2008 or so. It started becoming a thing with smartphones and the iPhone. And when that first vision came around, people weren't necessarily doing events on a mobile app. They were, maybe just doing banking or their airline things. But if you look over the course of the last, 15 or so years, that evolution has changed significantly. When you look at, I think the average amount, at least across some of the nonprofits that we work with, average amount of traffic that's coming from a mobile device versus a, PC or desktop, mobile is 71% plus. And when you go downstream to the younger audiences, that's significantly greater. So like average amount of time people are spending on their mobile device is like 4.5 hours a day, which seems totally crazy. But if you're looking at Gen Zers, that's like 5.5 hours. And so as we're trying to also attract this younger generation, they are not digital first, they are mobile first. And where they're spending their time is not a mobile responsive browser. They're actually spending 90% of their time in a mobile app. And so when you're able to have a mobile app experience that is optimized for the mobile features that are native that they expect, like carousels and site swiping and, being able to have, rolling dates and mobile check deposit, those are the things that they are accustomed to. Like that's the language that they speak. They speak QR codes, they speak SMS. If you said, grandma gave me a check and I have to like mail it into someone for the organization to get it, to then get my fundraising for thermometer to go up, guess what? I might forget about that check. It might get lost. And so how do you make it easy? How do we create that instant gratification experience so that I can do everything that I want to do for my peer-to-peer fundraising experience in the palm of my hand? And it instantly gives me that credit. So my thermometer goes up, I get a notification, and you're able to track your progress and feel rewarded that you're making progress towards your goal.
And it's really cool to watch too. And that's why, Kathy, I'm excited to announce, will be facilitating a panel of several different organizations doing this, including some mutual organizations that work between Neon One and Nuclavis, right? Like Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. How are people like them using it to kind of connect mission wise? And that's actually an interesting thing that I'd like to hear about before we start talking about. You're talking data, so I want to talk data, but I want to hear a little bit more of the identity piece, the connection to a cause. Is there maybe a specific example? Doesn't have to be one of our clients, but somebody that you've done that you're like, wow, that's a really good way that they got the mission into the mobile.
Yeah, there's actually 2 customers that I work with that have done, I would say, a phenomenal job in incorporating mission into the fundraising experience. Because if you are just talking fundraise, go get a self-donation, it's a little bit of a turnoff. You have to remind them of the why. Why am I fundraising? What's the impact? How am I also educating them on the cause? So the first example that I love is the Alzheimer's Association, that for their walk to end Alzheimer's, we created an augmented reality experience of their Promise Garden, which is, if you've ever been to one of their events, it is incredibly emotional. Where you have these different flowers, they represent, they're 4 different colors, each of them representing your mission connection. You're a caregiver, you lost someone, someone who's impacted, right? What is your connection to the cause? You write a dedication, you plant it in the yard, and then the wind blows and all of these flowers are moving, and it really makes you feel like I am part of a community. I am part of a larger experience, and we're all together, unified as one. So we created that experience in the mobile app through augmented reality. So for those people who want to plant a flower, they can do it directly in the mobile app. They can add their dedication, and then they can see all of the different dedications across the nation for other people that have the same experience that they have. And in fact, what we're actually seeing is those fundraisers raise 3 times more than other fundraisers. And so when you're thinking about how do you quantify, do I want to invest in these types of mission moments? But if they're raising significantly more, you're empowering them to be able to share those stories and encouraging, inspiring them to raise more money. Another example that I love is with American Heart Association. We work with Kids Heart Challenge, and they have this CPR video, which again, huge on how do we educate the kiddos for Kids Heart Challenge about heart disease and CPR, and how do you make sure that it's not fundraising. An educational element is incredibly important, and so they actually have it as one of their fundraising milestones. It's not just get a gift and make a gift. It's, hey, learn about CPR, watch this video. You can personalize it, upload your photo, use AI to actually make your mouth and face move, teaching you about CPR, and then you can share it and ask for a donation. And they've seen tremendous results, both from a number of videos that have been shared, amount money raised. And so I love how both of those are just 2 unique examples, but speaking to their audience based on what is important to their cause and how they're trying to share those educational or in-person event experiences in a digital format.
Well, and Kathy, you showed me your kind of Willy Wonka vision here, especially on that first one for Alzheimer's. We attended an event in Washington, D.C. for Amazon, and Kathy and I were just kind of at one of the venues afterwards, and I was like just asking about this type of stuff, and you just showed me the flowers popping up. And I tell that story a lot, actually, in context of mobile and these types of things, because I was just so blown away about how, like, even the names popping up, the colors, like, you have to have these little touches in the generosity experience thought through, because if it's a disconnect, right, if you're not using purple or the right hue, then what am I looking at? Right? There's a disconnect, and brand isn't the logo, it's the feeling that people have. So you've actually done some really great research, not just on a few organizations, but many different events that just came out. We're going to hear more about it at Dream Big, but let's unpack it for people a bit today. Tell us about this research, and then I have a few things I kind of want to drill into after reading a little bit earlier. And it's going to be in the show notes, folks, but Kathy's going to give a little preview. Tell us about this report that just came out.
So probably the couple of big things that, organizations are interested in is, like, what are the spring trends? What is it that I can take away? And what pivots do I need to plan on and start mobilizing as we head into the fall event season? This year has been unprecedented in many ways. There's been so much change. There's been uncertainty. And so the 3 key areas of focus of what's on people's mind is concerns about the economy, budget cuts, and staffing limitations. There's been a lot of organizations that have been hit with staff reductions, and they might be in the peer-to-peer space, but they might not be in the peer-to-peer space, but their resources nonetheless are going to be reduced, whether it's help from marketing or finance or IT or project management. And so those are the top challenges that people are facing. I think the other reality that we have is that peer-to-peer staffing has not fully recovered post-pandemic. And we need to be really frank and honest with ourselves that we are asking people to do more than ever with less. And, during the pandemic, a lot of orgs cut staffing 50+% and slowly started adding in, but they needed revenue to go up before they added staff. And it's almost like this chicken and egg thing. At what point, if you don't invest in the staff so that you can properly steward and coach and work with your fundraisers and participants and recruit them, then the revenue is not necessarily going to follow. And so I think that's been a slower recovery. And these individuals or organizations are asked to do less. And now we're seeing even deeper cuts, right? The one I would say kind of like shining light, I know there's been a lot of focus on WOC, is a few years ago, there's folks that are like, walk is dead. And it's like, oh my God, like that could not be further from the truth.
Oh, cool.
It is
Okay.
it is one of the biggest, I would say, pillars from a peer-to-peer fundraising event program, because it is community-based. It is about bringing people together, sharing hand in hand. Half the people don't even walk. They don't care about walking. It's getting together as a community, talking, getting them together, understanding, what the cause is, hearing from researchers, hearing from survivors, you name it, right? And so the bright spot is walks are still, huge, and they are actually minimally impacted this first half of the year. So either flat or very modest growth, which I will take modest growth in this economy.
Yep.
Where we are seeing a dip is cycling, endurance, and DIY, which is a little interesting. Cycling, endurance, typically higher minimum fundraising. And so not surprising if there's a little bit of economic concern, maybe I'm not giving quite as much, right? If your minimum was $2,000 or something to that effect. But the shining kind of spot outside of walks is the creative events is really where we're actually seeing growth. And those are pickleball, those are indoor cycling, spinning classes. We have another organization that is doing indoor ice hockey. You don't typically think about those types of events for peer-to-peer. And actually 11-Day Power Play is the organization I'm referring to, who's a shared customer of ours and is going to be on our panel.
Yep.
Sharing a little bit about, how they mobilize their community to have this 11-day hockey tournament, and they're raising a significant amount of money and seeing growth. And so there are, some interesting pieces there. Fundraising overall across the board, what we saw, about 50% of orgs are saying we're seeing fundraising down, but they're seeing 50% are saying that participant registration is up. So more people are interested in being, recruited to be involved, to feel like they're part of a community. Not all of them are fundraising, but those that are fundraising more. So it does show hunger to be making a difference. They want to be part of something. And maybe they're not fundraising today or super effective fundraisers, but how are you starting that stewardship process to grow that relationship over time?
And that's a nice kind of segue into the connections that I saw between our generosity report, and that's what Abby was talking about for peer-to-peer. But we actually found a really tight correlation between volunteerism and peer-to-peer events.
Mm-hmm.
But we also found that, especially after that first year, a lot of the volunteers are burning out. And so maybe let's speak to that in a tactical way. What have you seen effective to make sure? Because you kind of mentioned this even on the staff side, but I think it would probably go over on the fundraiser side too, and to a certain extent at their donors. But we're really focusing on the fundraisers when we talk about this question. What keeps people not only engaged but like excited to even put more effort in?
I think, one, making sure we're keeping top of mind that mission connection. It's not just, I'm asking you to fundraise and, we're raising $500. It really is about building a relationship. It's not just the organization. I'm the event manager. My name is Kathy. I'm so excited you returned to support us again this year. Here's 3 things that we've done over the last year that are so impactful. We're so excited that you joined us again. Would you be willing to create a team and help mobilize your network so we can make a greater difference, right? It's really making sure that it's very personal, it's very connection oriented, and it's not just asking them to be a fundraiser, but how are we bringing more people into the fold? I think in particular, when we're thinking about how are we leveraging these volunteers to mobilize communities, I think the greatest focus is recruitment and retention. Is how are we, helping bring back team captains? How are we helping bring back our top fundraisers? How are we getting them to bring more people to these events and become fundraisers? So I don't think it's about leveraging volunteers for just event day, cheering on the walkers, or, people at the sign up table or distributing t-shirts. We're talking about using them to mobilize your community to make sure that they're spreading the word. We're bringing more people back in, and we're actually attracting more fundraisers, because these are your champions. They're the advocates of the organization. They want you to succeed. So instead of just asking them to fundraise, asking them to help spread the word, recruit people, bring people back, expand their team, that's going to be the greatest impact that an organization can ask.
And we see this. This is why I love the report. So we're going to link to the report in the show notes. We're going to hear more about it at Dream Big on July 16th, as well as a lot of great actual stories. We have a whole movie theme planned. But what is really encouraging is that good research like this is building upon other good research, because even Giving Tuesday's Giving Pulse talks about the importance of advocacy as an action, right? Generosity's more than money. That is going to be the drumbeat through this entire season, folks. So because it's so much, Kathy, I want to end with one final kind of more contemplative question for you. And it doesn't have to be personal or work-wise or stuff like that, but what's a small habit or a decision that you have made that ended up making a really big difference?
So I'm going to get a little personal here and then explain the why. I lost my brother 23 years ago. And he was like my best friend. He was 11 months younger than me, practically twins. And I will say that that was a pivotal moment in my life at a very young age, to be able to really take a step back and make sure, are you living your best life today? And not putting stuff off for tomorrow, because tomorrow is not guaranteed. And so I really focus on what brings me joy. And are there things that, don't bring me joy? Are they not serving me? Me and you have talked about not drinking alcohol. It wasn't serving me. So guess what? It's no longer in the picture. And being really disciplined and intentional at living the life that's going to bring me the most happiness, because we don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. And I don't want to live with regrets.
I think that's beautiful. And thank you for also sharing all of that in vulnerability. I think that's also important. I mean, you've also introduced me to a fantastic ginger beer as well. So there's a lot of benefits when you focus on joy. And that's Kathy, I couldn't think of anybody else who I would want to plan an event just about the joy of peer-to-peer fundraising than you. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you wanted to make sure that we talk about today?
I can't think of anything. I think we touched on a lot of really great topics. I think the only other thing I would add, and I know we're going to dive into that greatly during the summit we have on July 16th, but when we're looking at some of these staffing constraints some of the organizations are having, one of their other top complaints has been like technology providers. And I think this also goes back to an opportunity of, how are we leveraging technology, whether it's your fundraising platform, your texting platform, your mobile app provider, your CRM, right? There's a whole, network of systems that we have to work with.
Yeah.
How are we using them to make our lives easier, whether it's AI, and using them smart so that we can do more with less, but making sure we're choosing the right technology partners to help us be more effective? I think that's going to be part of how this new next normal is going to look like, and setting up organizations to be successful.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, you did helpfully list a bunch of things that we just do, by the way, folks, in-house, connected, the texting and that, but we don't do mobile like Nuclavis. In fact, we don't even do it. We just work with you because you rock, and you rock, Kathy, in so many ways. I'm so excited to do this event with you. I'm so happy that we were able to have this conversation today, and I will see you on July 16th.
Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
one of the reasons that I'm excited about Dream Big on July 16th is because it helps bring together some of the smartest people that I honestly know in the nonprofit sector. I think that peer-to-peer fundraising gets a bad rap. I have been learning about it for a very long time. And one of the smartest people besides Kathy Kempf that I know is Katrina Van Huss and also Otis Fulton, her husband. And they have taught me a lot, but especially have taught me a fair amount around the psychology of giving. And so this is the segment where I'm exploring the generosity spectrum as a reminder. And so to put it in very concrete terms, what I want to explore is the underlying why that somebody gives. Because the mode of giving, the way of giving is just different than making a transaction for anything else. It's not a market exchange. It's not a good or a service, right? That's even written into the taxes. So one of the interesting things that Kathy, as well as Katrina, and Katrina even has a great video about this that I cite a lot, where what do you do with swag? Right? You have peer-to-peer fundraising. I see this a lot with recurring giving programs. Let's use those two examples. Same idea. What about swag? Because a lot of people, they want to give hats. They want to give the tote bag, right? The NPR thing, give this amount, you get a bag. And what some of the research has found is that it's actually a little counterintuitive. Because if you give people things to donate, they start actually calculating the worth of the thing. It moves beyond the core reason that somebody should be giving, which is that they care, that they want to make change, that they want to be part of a community, that they weren't guilted into it. And that's what philanthropic psychology also talks about too, right? You can't manipulate people to give. And so when designing a recurring giving program, when designing a peer-to-peer event, be careful with swag. Swag can be utilized. I love swag. Anybody who knows me knows I won't shut up about swag. My CEO even thought I had all the swag in my house. And I have a fair amount. And if you're listening, by the way, drop me a line, tim@neon1.com. First person who does it on this episode, I'll send you some swag. But that's the thing. Like, let's take that as an example, and I'll kind of land the plane here. The motivation there is because it's a fun thing to do, right? You want to be part of something, right? I hope somebody emails, because this is a little psychological test to see, will people do it? But it's not the core reason why somebody should do something, right? I like to give things. I think that's what gift giving is all about. And I think that that's what we're losing a bit in the nonprofit sector and peer-to-peer fundraising, recurring giving, because of the effort it takes and the size of the gifts and a lot of things. It has this almost weird adverse effect because it's a lower gift. Like, let's just give them something in return, and it cheapens it. It's a lot to think about, and that's what I want to use this segment for. So I'm going to kind of use the nonprofit hotline, which will be included in the show notes of the episode. That's where next week, or in 2 weeks, Sam Nyland will answer some things. Her and I will kind of tackle a question, but that's going to be driven by very practical things here. This is going to be 5 minutes of some philosophical unpacking of things that I think about on the motivation of giving and the psychology of giving. And it's just it's a really cool thing to think about. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to, tag me online after listening to this episode too, let's have a conversation. So coming right up, we're actually let's bring Sam Nyland on, and let's hear actually who we're going to be interviewing in 2 weeks. So we just wrapped a fantastic episode with Kathy Kempf. We heard a lot about our upcoming Dream Big Summit that's happening on July 16th, if you're listening to this live. But as is our new tradition, we're going to do a little bridge between each of our episodes. And that means I have my co-host here, Sam Nyland, on
Hey, everybody.
Hey. So, Sam, who do we actually have coming to be interviewed by you in 2 weeks?
Yeah. We have Daniel Myers. He is the executive director from Elgin Youth Symphony Orchestras. And we have a lot to cover, a lot of topics we're going to be talking about. And it's going to be a really exciting and moving episode. So I look forward to chatting with him and having you all tune in 2 weeks.
What's kind of wild is that usually we might say, oh, it's a performing arts organization. We're going to talk about ticketing. But at Dream Big, Sam, they're presenting on peer-to-peer fundraising. So it sounds like it's going to be pretty awesome. Any final words before we sign off today? You're going to get the last word.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing because you don't think of symphony orchestras doing peer-to-peer campaigns. So that's why we love talking with him, because he's going to have some cool insight and creativity that he's going to bring to the table that I think listeners are really going to enjoy. So stay tuned and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks for listening to the Generosity Experience. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'll see you in 2 weeks.